Hi everyone, in today's video we are going to be looking at passive voice and just doing a brief introduction to it. So to begin, we first need to talk about what is passive voice. So there are two different types of voice that we might write and speak in, active and passive voice. Active voice is when the subject of the sentence, the noun or the pronoun, who's doing the action, who's doing whatever the verb is, comes first in the sentence. So a really simple example of active voice is Steve loves Amy. Our verb is loves. The subject of the sentence is Steve, and Steve is the one who's doing the action of loving. Steve loves is our simple subject and simple verb. Amy in this sentence is an object. She's the one who's receiving the love. The love goes to Amy from Steve. So we have a subject and a verb. The subject is the person or the thing that's doing the action. Passive voice is when the opposite of that happens. So the subject of the sentence is going to be receiving the action instead of doing the action. So let's look at this first example. Amy is loved by Steve. Our verb phrase is loved. That's our action, is loved. But our subject in this sentence, what comes before, is Amy. Amy is loved. She's the one receiving the love, right? Steve is the one who in this sentence is doing the loving. So in this case, the object who is doing the action comes after, and the subject is not the one doing the action but receiving the action. So do you see how that's a flipped form? Another example of this is Amy is loved. We again have the verb phrase, the action is loving, but Amy's not the one who's doing the loving, she's the one who's receiving it. In this second sentence, we don't know who is loving Amy. That information is left out. Maybe it's Steve, but maybe it's her secret boyfriend, Joe. We don't know. So because of that, there are some advantages to writing an active versus passive voice. Neither voice tense is wrong per se, but it's appropriate to use different voices for different audiences. So for example, if you are listening to the news or reading the news somewhere, they a lot of times are going to use passive voice. Consider this statement. The bank was robbed. A journalist might say the bank was robbed if they don't know who the bank robber is, right? We don't know who did the robbing. The action was robbed. That's our verb phrase. But it's not the bank that's doing it. The bank is receiving the action. We have this mystery, by whom, that's left out of the sentence. Passive voice is really good for when we need to leave off information because we don't know it or because we're purposefully withholding it. Mystery stories are another great example of this. If you look at mystery and thriller and suspense stories, you'll see a lot of passive voice because they want you to not know all of the information. Active voice tends to be much more precise and clear. It also tends to be more concise. Notice that in these two sentences, I essentially said the same thing. Steve loves Amy and Amy is loved by Steve. I could do it in far fewer words when I wrote an active voice as opposed to passive. So active tends to be more clear, and it also tends to be more concise. So if you're trying to be clear and concise, you should be using active voice. If you have information that you're purposefully trying to leave out or obfuscate, that's when you should be using passive voice. You'll also probably notice that you are using passive voice when you are writing like lab reports for science classes, and that's because it creates a sense of objectivity. The narrator is just making observations rather than engaging with whatever it is, which is what you want when you're writing a lab report, when you're being a scientist, right? When we are writing for AP Literature, we are trying to engage as a reader. So we want that reader experience to be embedded within the way that we're talking about our interpretation of the text. We do that not by saying, I think, I believe, I noticed. Instead, we take out that first person point of view, but write it in active assertions that are our interpretations. So let's look at some really simple examples to make sure you understand passive versus active and how to change between the two of them. And then we'll also look at a couple of quick examples with more complicated sentences like you guys write when you guys write essays and things like that. Okay, so some simple examples. The dishes were washed by Jane. Were washed is our action. That's our verb phrase. The thing being washed is the dishes. So it comes before the verb. That means this one is passive. If we were to ask ourselves who is doing the action, we get in this one that it's Jane. If I wanted to rewrite this as active voice, I would say Jane washed the dishes. That then puts our verb, the thing receiving it comes after, and the object, in this case the person doing the action, comes before. We have the person doing the action, and then the object that's receiving it. As opposed to here, we have the thing receiving it, getting the action, and then the person doing it. Let's look at another. Her pen was broken. Was broken is our verb phrase. The pen is the thing that is being broken. It's not doing the breaking itself. We don't know who. Her pen was broken by the boy. I don't know. Maybe it was by a duck. I don't know. We don't know who did the breaking. This one is passive voice because the object that's being broken, receiving the action, comes before. I would need to know the who part in order to write this in active voice. I would need to say the boy, this is the hypothetical part, broke her pen. This is an example of where information is left out. My computer was read by Miss Jones. Was read is the verb. The computer is the thing being read. Miss Jones is the one doing the action, but the order's all wrong here. Or not wrong, just it's all passive here. So this one's passive voice because the person doing the reading comes after the action. The money was found under the floor. Was found is the verb. We're going to ask ourselves, who did the finding? Who or what? We don't know in this one. The floor didn't do the finding. This is a prepositional phrase. That has nothing to do with it. The money is the thing that was found. So again, we have a mystery. Someone found the money if we're turning that into active voice. As it is, this one's passive. My books were returned before class. Were returned is our action. The books are the thing being returned. Who did it, though? Who did the returning? Somebody returned my books before class. Notice again, this before class is another prepositional phrase. This sentence is passive because we don't know who is doing the action. The thing that comes before the action in the subject place of the sentence is the thing receiving the action, not the thing doing the action. Okay, so with those very simple examples, let's look at just a couple of harder ones. This is a paragraph about Othello, which you guys have read recently. Let's look at some of these passive voice examples. I've noted where they are because the ones that we don't do here, I want you to give a try. See if you can change them to be active, since we're going to want to write in active voice in AP Lit this year. The first sentence with passive voice says, Othello is known in the play as being a hero and recognized for his honesty and morals. So the two actions are is known and recognized. So Othello is known and recognized. Those are our verbs. Now, who knows that Othello is the hero? Are we talking about the readers? Are we talking about the Venetians? Who are we talking about? And recognized for his honesty and morals, again, who is recognizing him? Do we need to say the Venetians see, this gets complicated. The Venetians recognize Othello for his honesty and morals. We, the readers, are the ones that recognize him as a hero. So readers know Othello to be a hero. And the Venetians, or maybe us, I don't know, it depends on what this author means, recognize his honesty and morals. This noun, being in the subject place, is receiving those actions. So we would need to flip that wording around depending on what we mean as who is doing the action. Let's look at another one. The next sentence says, as Iago initiates his cruel plan, Othello's morals fade as he believes what he is doing is justified. There's a verb, is justified. What he is doing is the noun phrase, but it's not what's doing the justifying. It's the thing that's happening that's being justified. So we would need to say something like, if we're saying he believes what he is doing is justified, he believes Desdemona's infidelity justifies what he does. Do you see how I took this piece and I moved it to be after, and in place I put Desdemona's infidelity or perceived infidelity? That would need to come before, because that's what's justifying the bad things that he does. All right, the next sentence says, Othello kills his wife as he has been told. Has been told by whom? So Othello kills his wife as he has been told that she committed acts of infidelity, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to change this as to a sense because I think it makes it a little bit easier to see in this one. Othello kills his wife since he's been told by Iago, right? So Othello kills his wife since Iago told him, or told Othello, she committed acts of infidelity, right? That puts it, instead of as the pronoun talking about Othello first, not the person being told, but the person doing the telling. Iago, in this case, needs to come up here, and the he needs to go down here somewhere. Okay, so there are 3 more. Once it is revealed, that's the verb. The subject is it. The next one, Desdemona was killed. That's the verb. Desdemona is the subject, but it's coming before, so that would need to be changed. And then down here, Othello is being led. That's the verb, but Othello's the one being led, not the one doing the leading. Why don't you take a moment to see if you can rewrite those 3 bits of sentences so that they are active, and we will talk about it in class.